So let's start. They are confirming on YouTube that they can hear us now. So we're back live again. So dear speakers, sorry for this, and dear audience, dear students, thank you for your patience. So Andrei, Vladimir, and Dimitri, we are back on air again. Andrei had already started talking, but if you don't mind, Andrei, I apologize for this in front of the audience as well. Can you please start again? The topic of our discussion were these three questions: how the pandemic influenced your business model, how is your company overcoming the challenges, and if there are any opportunities, and whether this crisis is our new reality. So, Andrei, again, the audience is yours. Sorry for that.
Hello, dear CEMSs. It's great to join you guys again, this time as an alumni. And it's a pleasure to be back within GSOM, if not in person, at least virtually. I'll try to keep it brief, because we've already, unfortunately, spent a lot of time due to technology issues, but nevertheless. So myself, I'm a representative. I'm working for Yandex Market Group, which is a subsidiary now, a fully owned subsidiary of Yandex, and previously the JV between Yandex and Sberbank. That has two customer-facing platforms: Yandex Market, the price comparison website, and Biru, the upcoming marketplace in Russia. For us, the whole coronavirus situation, I think we're one of the few industries that actually tended to benefit out of this. And I think the lesson that can be learned is that whenever something goes down, quite often that market share and that spending is often redistributed to someone else who can take advantage of the current business environment and profit from it. While we can't say that overall consumer and retail spending did go down, I think what's more important, and what we can clearly see, that in many ways it was redistributed to e-commerce, which we're clearly benefiting from. So in terms of us, how has the coronavirus business model impacted us? We've seen a very large uptake in overall e-commerce growth in Russia, especially the domestic market. So excluding AliExpress and the goods coming in that will take 2-3 weeks to arrive, but things which they're able to be delivered to you next day or 2 days from now. And the switch to the greater influence of the marketplace model. So in this case, this would be ourselves, Ozone, and Wildberries, because this is a rapid enabler for small and medium businesses to start selling online and present their products to a much larger audience. So for us, I would say the first important comment is that rather than being a loser, we're clearly able to benefit from the current changes that are coming from COVID. Second point I want to mention in terms of how did our business model change and what is happening there. Well, realistically, COVID still affected us because it changed the preferences for the way customers receive their products. So rather than half the market and the general shift to locker-based pickups and pickup point-based pickups, there's been a shift to the courier services, which we think is temporary, and the market will return to a more natural trend, which we're already seeing right now, that pickup lockers and pickup points are becoming more prominent placement. They're already very well placed in Moscow, and that's emerging in our other larger cities. This was a challenge for us because the courier services, they're the most expensive part of the delivery versus pickups and lockers, which we're able to scale, and as a result, we see better unit economics. On the upsides, what it also changed is that there's changing market dynamics to greater push for prepaid deliveries. There sort of a large number of the major players decided to try and push the market away from cash on delivery to a prepayment only delivery basis, something which is already the norm in the West, But in Russia, many of the companies and many of the players, many of the customers are still used to only paying for the item once they receive it. As a result, guaranteeing that they know what they're going to get and making sure that everything is fine. Such things such as Corona are able to change this market shift and paradigm to a new norm, which in this case, cashless deliveries are more beneficial for us and for the customer. Once they understand that it's safe, that it's okay, the marketplace isn't gonna give them some kind of fake products. They're also becoming more acquainted with it, and it's becoming the new norm. How much of the crisis is the new reality? In terms of the shift of greater shift of power onto e-commerce, I think that is becoming the new reality. Lockdowns will pass. People will go back to stores, but in many cases, consumers which have never previously tried online shopping went out and did their first purchase online. Permanently driving away customers from the offline retail, as well as giving a boost and a push for the retailers which did not have a strong online presence, and a reminder to them that this is a major channel which is opening up, and it's important to you'll either be crushed by the revolution or join it. And in this case, marketplaces offer them an opportunity to join this revolution in the process rather than being washed away by it and remaining in pure offline mode. So I'll be short, but and then I'll give it back to the other partners to speak.
Okay, thank you very much, dear Andrei. So, dear Dimitri, would you like to take over and tell us your insights with regards to the pandemic? How has it influenced your business and your industry, the challenges and the opportunities there?
Sure, thank you. So I would actually start with I'll try to be a little bit provocative, so we really start a discussion. So I would say that even though this pandemic for sure was a big surprise to everybody, if we take a step back and listen to some famous Englishman from 1800, Charles Darwin, who's saying that it's never, and I'm sorry for maybe misquoting him, but it would go something like, it was never the strongest, never the smartest, but always the ones who is more adaptable to change who wins. And I think that before this crisis and pandemic, we tended to forget this truth that came to human society many years ago. So what we see a lot now, and I was not gonna talk about consulting industry too much because like consulting was going through a lot of changes. Basically, every project in a way is a new reality. So it was quite easy for BCG in particular to adapt to a new reality and go online and do the same agile style working that was happening before, but in a face-to-face reality. But what I was gonna share with you are a few stories of the same industries, but very different reaction to this COVID thing that hit everybody more or less in the same way within one industry. So, and I would try to have a few reflections on that. And my first reflection would be that it's always been, and in case of COVID, it is also a lot about responsibility. It is about responsibility the leaders of the company are taking for their business and for their employees. And I work a lot in construction right now, and that is that Yanis said in my introduction, this capital intensive projects. So I know a guy who's very modest, even though he's in Forbes list. And when this whole thing started off, basically he packed his things and he went to this site. He could be going anywhere, but he went to the region where his main activity is, to be with his people and to protect them from this COVID. And that was in mid-April, when even in Moscow, like people were still believing, is this thing true? Is this thing fake? What is this? Is that some sort of a global, I don't know, theory, conspiracy theory? So he did that. Not only he would basically, out of 10,000 people that he had on site, he would test everybody for COVID, and it's his private money. So he did spend a lot. Every test is more or less 2,000 rubles, so you do the math. And on top of that, he would bring the best doctors, and he quickly figured out that, maybe none of his managers has ever experienced COVID situation before. So he doesn't have a key to how to solve that. So he would bring in like the best people he knew, uh, consultants, to help him solve this situation. And for 2 months, he was there covering and protecting his people and his business. I think that the impact it had on the organization was just tremendous. And thanks God there was no single accident of COVID in this construction site, even though that was clearly not the case all over Russia. And we see from press very different realities. So I would say that this taking responsibility from the very top is very important, especially in this stress situation. So another thing I would mention comes also from a construction industry, but a very different aspect of it, or segment. So residential construction. You all know Inteca, which is a company which used to be very strong, maybe a market leader at some point, but then it went through quite hard times, even a bankruptcy, and now is owned by Trust Bank. But the CEO is a real visionary. And he realized quickly when the construction sites were closed down, he said that, look, this is going to be a new reality for us. So he's not the biggest player on the market, but what he did, he united the industry under his intellectual and just emotional leadership, and said, look, we're going to develop the new industry standards. We're going to say how to operate under new COVID requirements so that we keep social distancing. We do all the necessary precautions. At the same time, we go back to the government and regulators, and we're going to ask them to open the sites for us to be able to, provide people with new flats and all that, and at the same time not putting at risk all the construction workers, which are around 400,000 people only in Moscow. So he drove that from the very beginning of, like, from the initiating of the idea to implementation in Rospotrebnadzor decrees and further. And back to the third question that you had, he is and he was always saying that, look, even if this pandemic is not for good, he's sure that, like a next wave can come, or a next virus can come, or just any next volatility can come, and he wants his industry to be ready for this ways of working. So that is an example of leadership that, also exemplifies how people should react in a situation which was not expected by anyone. um, and I would probably make a third point and also save some time for us for discussions. I think that a lot of us, especially people coming from great school, from great education, great companies, do have a choice. They can, become a leader and drive the change and, take responsibility. Not all of us do have this choice. Unfortunately, there are kids, there are elderly people who are much in a less preferential condition. So I think that what crisis told us a lot is that, we have to care. And ultimately, this is probably most important lesson from this whole situation that I want to take with us, is the compassion that we have for people who are less advantaged than we all are. And I think that, I sit on the board of alums in another great school, and we also have troubles with, donations from alumni. So I would, use this opportunity, and I hope that some people actually hear us, to give back to your school, to your parents, to just people who are around you, but in a much less favorable positions. Use this opportunity. Understand that you could have been at their place. It was just a pure luck and your hard work. So respect that, and I say that to myself as well. We have to be mindful of where we are and why we got there. So I think that this I would totally agree with Andre that the pandemic would pass, but I do hope that we take some learnings from that, and like even if we have to go back to what Charles Darwin said 200 years ago, that would be a good reminder, and I hope that we wouldn't need any more costly reminders for us just to be watchful and observant of what's going on in the world. So thank you, and I hope I did save some time for Vladimir.
Yeah, you did fantastic. Thank you very much, dear Dmitry. That was very insightful. I myself have some questions on what I have heard so far from you and Andrei, but I will give now the audience to Vladimir. So Vladimir, thank you very much. The audience is yours. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Yanis. Happy to hear all of you, and thanks so much for this invitation. Really privileged to be here today with you. Yeah, Konstantin mentioned in the beginning of our roundtable that the university moved online, if I'm not mistaken, in a couple of days. That's amazing. It took us 2 weeks to move online for the company. However, Severstal is 50,000 people company with a lot of production plants. I also looked at Coursera just before the roundtable, and I found 98 online digital courses from the St. Pete State University. Guys, congratulations, because the Moscow State University has only 11. So you are doing a very good job. So please go ahead with that for sure, because online education is likely to become a serious trend. So going back to your questions, Yanni, thank you so much. It's so nice already to take first lessons. I will just describe how we have been surviving the crisis, and then we'll definitely leave some time for the discussion. So as we all know, the pandemic outbreak reached Russia later than most Western countries, and that gave us some time to analyze the situation and learn from the experience of others. Strict quarantine restrictions were not imposed in Russia until the middle of March. Severstal is a 50,000 people company, as I mentioned, in several Russian regions with headquarters in Moscow. And we make steel, we mine iron ore and coking coal, all our assets in Russia, but we have shipments globally. At our chairman's request, we established immediately in March an antivirus emergency committee, which established regular meetings, sometimes 3-4 times a week, including heads of all business units, also industrial safety guys, production, IT, HR, communications, legal, and security. So that really helped us, because you need to establish this structure from the very beginning at the top level, not to miss important activities to be taken to protect your people. And our response to the crisis was as what you would expect from any company. So number one, so it's support of our people. Number two, save the business. And number three, help those in need. It's same as with the warning in airplane, how you should be putting on a face mask, right? First on yourself and then on the kid. So talking on people, we were really one of the first in the Russian industrial companies to move almost half of our employees to remote working. It's 50,000, as I mentioned. 20,000 of those are working with computers and in offices, and 30 are floor workers. They are working at the plants. And we continued our operations through the whole pandemic, definitely provided with the safety measures. So that was a big test for our IT guys to move 20,000 people online and to continue with dealing with our customers. But I guess we were quite successful. We had long been running on SAP for internal document flow and client and procurement relations. We also have an online shop to sell steel. Imagine you can really buy steel right now online, not only at Severstal and other companies, but just to give an example that we're already online from that angle as well. And all our payroll accounting functions have been centralized many years ago in a shared service center in Yaroslavl. So we have been pretty online, and that's why that was not a big issue for us. We have managed this. In terms of the plant personnel, so we installed thermal scanners at the entrance of all locations. We have provided a lot of additional PPE, personal protective equipment to our staff. Social distancing requirements were necessary, a lot of disinfection points, and definitely a lot of disinfections. We stopped all travel across Russia, around the world. All meetings then became online, and our production guys, we were using a lot of video as well, and WhatsApp groups, and a lot of other technologies as well to continue with their meetings. The most interesting thing, the most difficult thing was to stop handshaking. Yanis, maybe you understand, I don't know about the Greek culture, but I guess it's pretty same. Yeah. So yeah, it was quite difficult. You know, right now, the discipline is very high. People are wearing face masks. They're keeping social distance at cafes and in the office, at the plants, and handshakes have gone away. So interestingly, would it be coming back, or the new normal, which we will discuss later, would be without any handshakes? I guess we will return back to handshakes. So on saving the business, we have cut our CAPEX, which is development investments funds, by 15%. 15% this year. Still, we continue with a lot of our projects of development. We have stopped all our M&A plans, and we have cut budgets of our functions and departments by a pretty same amount of like 15%. Helping others was also a crucial part for Severstal because we are huge industrial companies, and in some of the regions and some of the cities, we are like the biggest employer. So first of all, we have provided additional funding to our personnel, understanding that they have additional costs today to buy PPEs, to also working from home. Then we started gathering requests from the regions of our presence, and a total amount of what we have provided, both in funds and also prepaid food cards, which was a joint project with a large retail company in Russia. So where underprivileged families in the regions of presence, they got those prepaid cards and they could buy food at local shops. So that was really also helping people during this crisis. So the total amount reached 1.5 billion Russian rubles to date of our support. So going forward, just to start our discussions, 3 things to mention. A survey among our employees has shown that 40% of our staff, and that survey was held a month ago, I guess right now the figure is even higher, 40% of our staff would prefer working from home after the pandemic. So if not it's necessary, those people will be comfortably staying home and working from there. That's why we are now gathering feedback from our staff and trying to analyze how to find a hybrid scheme of working for our staff, where they can be, for instance, working with some so-called hot desks, as typically has been for quite some time at the big 4 companies and global consulting companies. There would be some part of the personnel who prefer working from office as before, and those who are working totally remotely from home. Several other things. What the pandemic has brought. Then, unfortunately, the pandemic has broke up, hopefully temporary, global supply chains. And that was quite important for us because the world has been moving into this globalized world for many decades, and the world economic thinking was that each country has its specialization, and there should be big hubs for production of certain products or services for the world. In pandemic environment, when restrictions are out there, when countries try to save their own people, and also travel shipments are limited. For instance, we faced a problem of getting respirators, face masks, for our production plant and employees from a large US company. a well-known US company, which was not able to meet the demand and even had certain local restrictions to supply respirators out from the United States. So what we had to do, we found some suppliers elsewhere, but also we are now assembling a production line for respirators in Cherepovets, where our main steel plant is located. So can you imagine, in the future, we will be self-sufficient in respirators, which we haven't thought before. We will probably even get some certification for those, and we'll be selling extra products to the market. So it shows that after such a pandemic, a lot of companies will be trying to have a backup production or stock of the most important elements they need for their operations, not relying on one single supplier. The second thing, fortunately, we started it before, is 3D printing, which is widely used also in steel today. And we're using 3D printing to restore spare parts for our equipment. So that also was helping. And finally, we have all seen an example of an African fully automated gold mine, which continued its operations through the pandemic without any interruptions. So the question of further automation is definitely on the table.
Amazing, amazing. These are all amazing insights. Thank you very, very much, dear Vladimir. Right, thank you all for your insights. I was taking notes while you were talking, and I'm trying to find potential common points or potential even contradictions to inspire, the discussion. We also have some questions from the students, but before we get to the questions from the students, as far as I understood, all your three companies, they did very well into responding quickly to the pandemic. You described situations where you reacted quickly, where you adapted, where you developed, where you managed even to grow within the pandemic. You didn't stop your operations to a certain extent. So I would like to ask you, what is the secret or these elements that help you move fast and adapt quickly in such crises? What is the lesson that comes from your own company that you can share with us into adapting or changing quickly? Andrei, would you like to offer a few thoughts, or any other speaker? If I don't mind about the order, yes? We can be flexible. It's a friendly discussion.
Sure, I can start. I think for us, it was less of a challenge than for other large companies due to the modularity which Yandex has. Yandex is built up as a set of several independent P&Ls, with Yandex being sort of the holding company de facto, and then you have different vertices, which have relatively large autonomy within their decision making. So for us, our decision making really is around Yandex Market Group rather than the rest of Yandex. While we do follow overall norms such as whether we're working in the office or not, all the business operating decisions are made locally. So in terms of running the company, there's a lot of pushing down the decision making to the large BU level, which allows it to be much faster than if we had to wait for Tigran, sort of our second in command, or somewhere else for the decisions to be made. Number two, I think it's a clear and transparent governance process that brings up all the right numbers up for management review on a regular basis, which allows you to see where and when problems occur quickly. Without this, it's much harder to respond from a business perspective to what needs to change and understand the risks. So for us, an example of this was partially driven by the pandemic, partially driven by new business norms. We're pushing more of our products to be kept outside of our own warehouses and via the drop shipping model, which included that the items be stored in the partners' warehouses. As a result, we have additional costs come up because the orders were being sent to customers. He only paid once for the delivery, if he paid at all, but we had additional costs come up as a result of two packages being delivered. we had to introduce sorting centers. A clear management reporting system allowed us to see this problem. COVID only accelerated this happening because we wanted to manage our risks and ensure that there's assortment that's not only kept at a central warehouse where there could be problems if it was shut down, but in terms of responsiveness, this was a clear benefit, having the clear governance structure be put in place. So for us, I would say those are the two key important factors.
Amazing, amazing. Thank you very much. Thank you. Dimitri?
I would again agree with Andrei. I think that it all boils down to the organizational structure of a company. I think that if you are built from a really small independent blocks or units which are able to take decisions, then it's quite easy to adapt to any change, including pandemic, COVID-19, or any other change. As you know, like leaders used to say, there are two people who are ruling the army: one the general, and then the sergeant, who basically is in charge of 10-20 people. So that you know, like for companies that are built on these principles, I think it was relatively easy. I must also say that we should not underestimate the luck factor in this. So when people say that, look, you know, like some industries definitely were hit less than others. So I'm here really you know, impressed by what Vladimir said Severstal did, because their business by the organization and by nature is much harder to adapt to such change. So I would say that, yeah, you know, this is basically where we should take some learnings.
Fantastic. So, Vladimir, now the burden is on you to tell us about how your company managed to do it.
Sure. Thank you, first of all, Dmitry, for your appreciation. Thank you so much. I guess the secret is very evident, if I may. So we have passed so many crises, and we have long understood that to survive the external shocks, which are beyond your control, you have to be very low cost through the cycle all the time. One of the lowest costs, so keep all the time your cost low. And secondly, keep your balance sheet strong. Don't have huge debts, because at some stage you won't be able to repay the debts, right? Finally, I guess it's having universal product. Sometimes commodities are viewed, steel is not fully commodity. We have some very value-added steel when we are supplying to oil and gas companies. For instance, we are supplying super steel for St. Petersburg shipbuilding plants. We are supplying to Western car makers who are building cars. However, part of our portfolio is very standard steel, which is traded globally. So having a universal product which is not built for one specific customer who might be in problem, right? You have opportunities if your costs are low and if ports are still open, and in the pandemic, ports were still open, fortunately, and railways, right? For goods deliveries, I mean, right? So that's why that traffic didn't stop, fortunately. And we just shifted a lot of those unused volumes in Russia with the collapse of the local demand to export markets. Unfortunately, in the pandemic versus the global financial crisis in 2008, the countries and regions were moving into the pandemic slowly and gradually. So China was first to get into the crisis, but it was first to get out of the crisis. Russia was one of the last. So when China was already in issues and lockdowns, Russia was still okay, and we were selling here locally. So when Russia faced the problem somewhere in March and April, we started shifting volumes back to China and to some other markets because they already started recovering. So, I mean, having the benefit of the global shipment, having a universal product which can be used either in Russia or Indonesia or Vietnam or Middle East is a very good thing. Keep your costs low if you have a business, diversify your customer base, and keep your debt low. I guess those are very evident for things which are universal for probably any company, I would say.
Fantastic, fantastic. I am really taking notes here, and I might invite you to join my classes as guest speakers. You know, you have more valuable lessons than what I offer in the class. But I have a question for you. So you said the first two speakers talked a lot about the structure, modularity. So Andrei and Dimitri, they talked about the decision making, decentralization, about clear and transparent government processes, and you talk about adaptation quickly and learning, you know, through this crisis. However, you, Vladimir, you talked about keeping your costs low and your balance sheet strong and having a universal product that is standardized and being able to switch from one client in one country to another, depending on the pandemic wave, then you manage to survive. However, is there any of the words that Andrei and Dimitri mentioned applicable to you? For example, Dimitri, if I'm not mistaken, said that now the sergeants, not just the generals, they have a more strategic role, which means that decentralized approaches allow you to move faster, right? So in Servestal, has the pandemic affected the way you make decisions and the structure of the company?
Thank you, Yanis, and thank you for finding this very interesting topic. We have started a very big transformation of our company 2 years ago in 2018. We now have a 5-year strategy which strives us to make us one of the leaders in the global steel universe, still keeping our costs low, however, having a portfolio of a lot of so-called unique selling propositions, right? And this is where we are trying to set up a lot of joint venture with international Russian companies, and we are going further with our customers to provide them not only products but already solutions. And this is where our plan to go. We believe if we want to get a bigger market share, if we want to have client stickiness, right? Because if you're providing services to a customer, it's very difficult to replace you. So what I mentioned to you, commodity strategy is nice. However, you can be easily replaced if someone comes next with a lower cost. So long term, we definitely want to be a less commoditized company. However, we've been talking about pandemic and survival. So I guess in the survival mode, those expansion products, when you develop some specific customized things, probably will not be so important as keeping your costs low and selling what you already know, an established product to the market where you can, because you have to survive.
Yeah.
When the market opens up again, and what's happening already, we continue with those new developments. And that requires what you mentioned, and Andrei and Dmitry, a lot of local initiative. And we're trying to wake up our personnel to help them to become entrepreneurs in a way, if you like, so that they come with creative ideas. We have even an accelerator in the company where an employee can come up with an idea and say, I want to make some specific sort of steel for the St. Petersburg State University. That product will be widely used there and maybe somewhere in some other higher education institutions. I'm just inventing, on top of my head. And that person coming with an idea can get financing from the company, resources, and can build up a small business inside Severstal for further profit sharing. So that's already a reality. However, not that many people are ready to change, if they have been, part of a bigger company and making their part of the job. So the future is definitely what was mentioned by Andrei, and we are very inspired by companies like Yandex and a lot of others. So there is no contradiction, I would say, if I may.
True. Thank you very much for explaining this. Are there any comments from the other two speakers? Would you like to contribute something, or would you like me to go to questions from the audience?
Let's get the audience involved. I think that we owe them a lot for technical mistakes at the beginning.
Yeah. Okay.
Diversification, though, maybe I can briefly mention. For Yandex overall, I would have to say that yes, we also took similar cost cutting, not a cost cutting, but maybe cost management measures. So for us, it did include that in the beginning of the pandemic, we had headcount freeze. We did include sort of minor reductions to SG&A costs. So any kind of travel budgets, any kind of major events, all those got cut. But I wouldn't say that it was particularly effective. However, it is important to note that as soon as a crisis is on the horizon, it is an important time for the CFOs to kick in and say any of those extra perks that you get during the good times, it's time to trim the fat, and let's do it off the SG&A costs before we have to do it off the people. In terms of diversification, the same thing goes here, because for us, we're the portion of Yandex that won out. But in terms of overall Yandex, of course, they had lower sales, advertisement revenues. They had lower sort of revenues from taxi, which is a major portion of Yandex's business. So the fact that they're able to diversify through a variety of businesses and business ventures is significantly beneficial to the company.
Amazing. Thank you very much. Okay, so let's move to some questions from the audience. So we have a question from Vasily, and it's on BCG. So I'm following up on what you said, Andrei. Has BCG faced difficulties while interacting with its clients online? Were there any attempts to modify contracts or retreat from support of the company, dear Dimitri? What do you think? Would you like me to repeat the question?
No, I think I understood the question. I think that overall it all went fine. So I think that in general BCG works with quite advanced organizations. So like when everybody understood that like being on sites can be dangerous for both sides, basically, because nobody wants a heated discussion on whom got infected from who. So I think that it was quite a quite a stable process of saying, look, since now we leave the on-site, the premises, or like here we stay. And in fact, we've got a few teams in Kazakhstan and in Azerbaijan, in other locations where basically we were removing people on literally last flights back to Moscow. Somebody even decided to stay in other countries. So, but in general, I think that it went completely fine. I'm not aware of any disagreements with the clients on how on the new modus operandi. I was among the ones who, early in, even before May, in late April, went to one site to support the client, because I believe that this is, like it's an important client for me, and he went, so I did go with him as well, doing all the tests and staying on quarantine for 14 days on the location. So in some cases we even kept the physical presence, where with all the precautions, like global leadership was involved. You understand, the global companies watch it very carefully, but we realized that it would be important for the client to be with them at some in some locations. So in a nutshell, what happened, that there was mutual agreement in all the cases. What is the next modus operandi? In most cases we went online, and it went surprisingly smoothly. In some cases, rarely cases, we decided that it would be beneficial for both parties to stay on sites, and that actually worked as well. So I think that like having a look at the future, it's going to be a mixed model. People did realize that online is not as scary as it seemed. At the same time, physical meetings and physical presence has certain advantages that you cannot complement with online. So it's a good mixture, and I think that we were experimenting with styles of working, and so far I must say it's working much better than I would expect.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Now, I have a question that maybe all of you can offer an insight, or any of you that wants to offer his thoughts. What business models are most likely to become extinct after COVID-19? So again, about adaptation and evolution. So are companies like Yandex or even Vuxville that are asset light proved that they are more preferential on the market? So do you think there are any particular business models that they will go extinct, and are some others that they are more they have more benefit on evolution? Can you think of any companies that are gonna have major issues?
I can give an example. I think it's much more about the ways of thinking and the mindset than particular companies. As we described, basically in any industry, you can have a business model or a way of working that is quite stable towards external shocks. But right before this conference, I got a call from a friend who is a top manager in a big Russian company. But his hobby is he invests in real estate, and he's quite a sizable investor. So basically, what he did during the COVID, he said, look, the rent rates are going to go down. So what I would do, I would find one magic tenant who would who would rent out all the shopping mall, and then I would sell it off to some strategic investor, because the real estate prices are quite high now and the rental rates are quite low. So he was preparing this deal for literally all the pandemic, 2-3 months. Every bet was on it. And then guess what? Today he calls. He said, "Look, the other party withdrew after signing the letter of intent." He's devastated. He blames everything: COVID, Donald Trump, everybody, except for lack of diversification that he himself was supposed to fix as the first thing he would do entering in the crisis. So I think that. Basically, the mindset that thinks that the future or you are protected from shocks is gonna be extinct pretty soon. But I don't think that there are any particular business models which are doomed.
Okay, thank you very much. Any of the other two speakers would like to?
Yeah, Yanis.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yes.
If I may, yeah. I was also thinking about office spaces and real estate, which is in big trouble today around the world, same as shopping malls. It's interesting that I've heard somewhere that it takes 3 months for people to get a new habit accustomed. I'm sure Andrei from Yandex knows it's much better, and maybe some comments will be provided later. But what has happened? I like the phrasing from William Gibson, who is a US writer, and he writes on the future a lot of books. And he's well known for a phrase that the future is already here, but it's just not distributed evenly around the planet. So we have been seeing Amazon, Google, Yandex, Mail, all those companies living in their world, and then the rest of the society, right? In the pandemic, a lot of people from different ages have had to master online communications, ordering food, drugs, everything, right? So, and likely that's to stay, right? So online sales will be definitely going up, killing shopping malls. At the same time, employees have got credit in their staff who are working remotely. Initially in Severstal, it was a nightmare for some bosses, because they can't see people. It was, scary for them to think that someone sitting home is doing anything for Severstal. Probably people are spending time with their families and having fun. However, we all know that people on pandemic home have been working 2 times more, because you start 9 o'clock in the morning and you stop answering mails and calls at 10 or 11 p.m. every day. So it was a real problem for people to sustain this difficult race, right? So that's why a lot of companies have got credit that once they have people not in the office, they are still working and working well. But where it leads to? It leads to an evident idea. Why should you be hiring expensive people from Moscow, St. Pete, New York, London, or San Francisco? Why not looking at opportunities in small Russian cities with excellent, brilliant students who can now be working online at half the cost, right? So I hope the pandemic will give a lot of opportunities to develop a lot of regions, not only in Russia, but around the world. And that will be a game changer and will bring a lot of talent, so that people don't have to relocate from the cities they love if they don't have any reason to travel, right? So real estate, shopping malls issues, I guess car dealers will also be disrupted sometime in the future. And Yandex is doing a lot actually to kill that business, because why not buying a car online? You know how it looks like, you can see it, you can get a test drive, right? So those guys will be disrupted. And finally, what we have seen is travel. Travel is the worst sector possible for investments. Warren Buffett lost $50 billion on the shares of air companies. That was his probably biggest loss in the whole of his history, right? So, and large Boeing, Airbus, some others have stopped production of large planes. Everyone was trying to build a very big plane, which be fuel efficient, which will take a lot of people. Looks like we need very small planes, and we don't need open spaces at all, because in pandemic open spaces is the worst what you can imagine, right? So will be a lot of changes, but however, it will also give a lot of opportunities for those who are selling furniture. I'm sitting at home today because it's Friday, and unless you have meetings, you can be working remotely. I'm tired of sitting on a standard chair. I'm already to buy an office one, at some stage, because it's difficult. So those guys will benefit from people sitting home and buying furniture, So that's from my side.
Use Beru. Andrei will lead you the way.
Absolutely.
Looking
forward.
If I can add to this conversation, I agree with a lot of the points that my colleagues mentioned. But however, I would like to mention that our memory is usually quite short. Humanity has been around for thousands of years. This is not the first and not the last pandemic that society has lived through. And in this has developed that all this exists. Hopefully a vaccine or a more permanent cure for COVID will be developed sooner rather than later. But I think the business environment of personal face-to-face meetings, that is something that has evolved over hundreds of years. And there will still be a lot of value added to it. Rather than saying that there's a permanent destruction of certain industries that, like my colleagues mentioned, it's important to note that it's not a destruction, but rather a temporary shift of power from them, and we may not go to exactly the same level as it was before, but the regular norms will start to come back. Quite often, the shopping mall, it's not only a source of getting the item that you want, it's a place for socialization, it's a place for going out and meeting someone to spend time. I can watch all my movies online, but I sometimes prefer to go to the cinema and see it on a huge screen. Same thing for office, for common office spaces. While it is possible that certain tasks are easily done in the offline mode, for us, what we see, at least, we're able to effectively complete current ongoing products and projects, but it's a bit more difficult to launch new major initiatives without some kind of either face-to-face conversation or an ability to draw it. We adapted it by using things like just Miro for sort of placing sticky notes and so on. but it doesn't necessarily fully replace the in-person environment. And in that regards, will it push certain businesses aside and make it more difficult for them to survive? Yes, it will. Their growth prospects will definitely change, but it's too early to say that this is a crisis that is the end of a particular business.
Fantastic. Thank you all very much. These are wonderful insights. We don't have a lot of time, so I will combine two last questions into one, still essentially two questions, and then we'll wrap it up. So we have a question from our students that is it's a burning question for the students. The question is the following: do you think that more technical skills, like being more tech savvy, digitalized in terms of your background and education, will be more attractive for companies these days? Do students need to level up their skills in terms of technical expertise and digitalized projects in order to be more attractive for your companies? We cannot hear you. Yeah.
Let me then start as a person representing Yandex. I think yes, definitely. To me, I regret not spending more time learning things about coding and how information systems work. I still don't have a full understanding of what half the people in IT do. There's literally for Yandex Market, in terms of our FTEs, more than 50% is the IT department. So in terms of your growth prospects, if you want to be working in a highly rapidly changing environment, learning to work with them, if you're on the product side or being on their side, is a great skill to have, and I regret not putting more of it into me as a student myself.
Thank you.
Yeah, sorry. Please go ahead.
Let me probably come to that question from a different perspective. I graduated with a major in math and did a lot of coding, and I would probably say that these technical skills and the way you use it depends a lot on the way you want your career to develop. Ultimately, you have to make a choice, right? Either you want to become an expert in one way or another, and then technical skills are very important, and you want to be the best in it, or you want to go up by the management ladder, and then something very different is important. Yes, you would have to speak fluently about Python and all that stuff, but I see a lot of people who are quite comfortable just knowing a few words about all these things, and that never stopped them from being in really top management and shareholders' shoes. So there is no right or wrong answer, right? You have to spend more time on stuff that you like, that you enjoy. In any career that you would choose, you would have hard times, be it with technical skills or with managerial skills, and you'd better spend this hard time with stuff that you really love than with coding that you hate. For example, if you're not a tech savvy guy or girl. So I would give this bullshit advice, but I still that works. Listen to your heart, spend time on something that you like and not waste it on something else.
Okay, thank you very, very much. And Vladimir?
Yeah, so that was an amazing comment from Dmitry, that even a million years ago, the most important thing was, as was mentioned by probably Steve Jobs as well, that you need to do what you love in your life, and then your career money will come later, most of the time. However, to be practical in my advice, I would say that I'll give you an example of communications. I run a communications function, and we run internal communications. It's explaining employees what is happening, gathering feedback. It's external communications, working with the media, and investor relations and social media as well. So I can tell you that from the management, we are now required to have a KPI which is strongly driven by data. Right? So it's like the number of likes, the number of reactions, engagement rate of employees, because we have a lot of digital formats, right? So we're gathering feedback. We are now even thinking about building an algorithm based on big data to process the feedback we are getting electronically from employees, to try to understand what's the moods in the company in different parts of the organization. Can you imagine? You hold a conference, 500 people, they anonymously in our application write their questions and comments. They like right now with Yanis is taking questions from a chart. So the same we have at Severstal with our own application. At the same time, later we would like to process all data from the conference through our specific algorithm, which would say that in this specific conference, the number of critical things have been higher, let's say, or lower than normally before. And that will give management an immediate interest in information. And if there is big deviation, that will help them to look at those blockators, you know, those issues. So that's why digital world is definitely coming. It's not necessary that you understand coding and Python yourself, but you need to understand the bigger picture, how modern technologies can be applied in your specific area. Either it's definitely data science, or it's communication or marketing, where digital is also widely used. If you go into marketing, Andrei can tell you a lot about those programmatic things for advertising distribution. So it's really coming. So I think it's really important to understand that. Secondly, I've heard somewhere there are 3 critical C's, or in Russian K's, care, which are necessary for a successful career today. It's critical thinking, it's cooperation, and it's creativity. So if a person complies with all those qualities, he has critical analytical thinking, he has a shadow of doubt when having information, he double checks that in different sources, and he can come up to the management with a solution, or with spotting those inefficiencies, right? That will be highly appreciated by the management. A person needs to be cooperative. Even if you are doing a small project yourself, you still very likely will be interacting with a lot of agile teams, what Andrei has mentioned. Every company today is not like one specific department. You are working at the same time on 5-7 projects with a lot of other departments, and that will require a lot of emotional intelligence, right? And being cooperative is very important. And finally, it's creativity, what I mentioned at the beginning. Every company, to become faster, same as IT companies, right, will try to wake up their staff across all levels so that they come up with ideas, so they challenge the already established products and processes. So be a person of that creative type, so that will help you as well.
Fantastic, fantastic. These are amazing insights from all of you. Thank you so much. We are running out of time, and apologies if I kept you a little bit longer, and also apologies to our audience, because we have some very interesting questions, but we don't have extra time. So questions about SMEs, about innovation, where it should come R&D, and how we overcome the crisis, but we don't have time, unfortunately. So maybe we'll be given the opportunity on the next session or another time to discuss further. On that note, allow me to close the discussion by offering some of the points all of you, our wonderful speakers, said before, as advice to our students and relevant to the topic of new business models. So you talked about crisis as an opportunity to practice adaptation to change. You said about crashing or joining the revolution. So it's better for all of us to join the revolution. You said about helping others, about compassion in your leadership and emotional intelligence, along with the holistic perspective that I think is very, very important these days. Regardless if you are an expert, I think it's very important to be able to see the bigger picture. As Vladimir just mentioned right now, critical thinking, cooperation, creativity is key to survive and thrive in the market these days. And you also said about being respectful and mindful, and to be able to navigate between different roles and situations. So on that note, I think these will be key elements to fuel the change and the transformation in our businesses these days. And if you don't have any other notes, I would like to close this conversation by saying a big thank you from the bottom of my heart to our beloved speakers today, Vladimir, Andrei, and Dimitri. You did a fantastic job. I'm pretty sure that the audience is thrilled, and I hope we see you again soon. I wish you all the best for your personal and professional life, and I wish you enjoy your Friday afternoon and your weekend. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much. Good luck.
Thank you for everything. It was fantastic. Thank you very much, guys. Bye-bye.